Minister, the cost of living is squeezing families right across the country at the moment. And there's a feeling of the 1980s right across towns and villages up and down the length and breadth of this country at the moment. Families simply can't pay bills. They cannot buy the necessities, such as food and clothing for their children. And food banks and St Vincent de Paul's around the country are out the door at the moment. The Capuchin Centre in Dublin and other food support networks are inundated. There's a real crisis washing through the whole of the country at the moment. And even before this cost of living crisis, there were 661,000 people living in poverty in this state. Shockingly, nearly 250,000 children living in poverty. And these figures have obviously increased in the last 2 years. 133,000 people currently who are working poor, people doing 40 hours work a week, but still living in poverty in this state. And what these people cannot understand is the lack of urgency coming from government at the moment. It's incredible. We're going to have to listen to a debate over the budget for the next 2 months in relation to what the government will or won't actually bring to the table in terms of help for these families. Today, many of these families will fill their cars full of fuel. It could take 120 quid to do that, but they know that 50 euros of that is going into the government straight away in the form of taxes. They know that the government is actually harvesting more in terms of fuel taxes today than they did before the cost of living crisis happened. And they can't figure out why the government won't help them in relation to this. This year, the back-to-school costs are going to be extremes for so many families. And the Irish League of Credit Unions has done good work into analysis in relation to this. And they have said that sending a child to primary school will cost a family €1,186 per child. Secondary schools, even worse, at €1,491 per child. And these stresses economically are putting pressures on families as well. 63% of families say that the back-to-school costs will add a financial burden to their family. 2/3, a majority of families, see that moment in time as an enormous pressure on their own families. Even worse, 1/4 of parents say that back-to-school costs will put them in debt of up to €336, while 1/3 of families are actually putting the debt onto their credit cards. And in the most extreme cases, 1 in 20 are turning to money lenders who are charging extortionate interest rates just so that they can pay for the typical issues going back to school. So we got a rip-off Ireland pushing parents into debt just in order for their children to get an education. And again, these statistics are from last year. They have obviously got worse in relation to what's happening in the cost of living crisis at the moment. Now, arguably, the situation for third-level students is even more grim. I've seen a 2-bedroom apartment in Galway being advertised for €1,750 a month. And at this stage, I know of children who are commuting from places like Athlone into Galway, places like Virginia into Dublin, now on a daily basis, so that they can access third-level education. Some children are using hostels at the moment, and those hostels are charging up to €50 a night just for those young people to be able to access college. So whether it's the cost of accommodation, increasing costs of uniforms, books, transport, extracurricular activities, what we're seeing now is not just a cost of living crisis, but for many it means that certain sections of our society are being locked out of third-level education. Young adults from low and middle-income families are literally being locked out. So we're having the divides within society are being increased. A ceiling is being put on the potential of some young people at the moment, and it's actually sapping this nation of its future prospects. I will say I'm glad to hear about the increase in the back-to-school allowance. I'm also welcome the fact that the government are going to talk about school meal scheme to be included in the budget. We in Aontú for some time have been pushing the Minister on this, but we would look for oversight in the amount that's spent. The amount that is being spent by the government is increasing, but the level of school meals actually being achieved is actually reducing at the moment. And we need to make sure that both the investment and the school meals are increasing as well. And just to say, in relation to this, that it is incredible that this is happening at a time when there's so much wealth in society, when there's so much profiteering in society. The Oxfam report titled Profiting from Pain estimates that billionaires in the food and energy sectors are now increasing their fortunes of up to $1 billion every 2 days. Even in this state, there has been an increase of 15 billion euros since the start of COVID. We need to make sure that we live in a more equal society. And that means funding those in low and middle income earnings, but also it means taxing those who are making gross profits at this time.